1992. You know, most people today hear the word Yugoslavia and think of maps, broken countries, war, history. But for the people living there back then, it wasn't history. It was their normal life falling apart in real time. And honestly, that's what makes this story so disturbing. Because before the bullets, before the tanks, before neighbors became enemies, they were just ordinary people trying to live normal lives, like Milena and Branko. Both of them grew up in Sarajevo. Back then, Sarajevo was one of the most mixed cities in Europe. Muslims, Serbs, Croats, everyone lived side by side. People married across ethnic lines, kids went to the same schools. Nobody really cared where your family came from. At least, most people didn't. Milena was 19. Quiet, creative, the type of person who noticed little things. Rain on windows, old songs, streetlights at night. She spent most of her time sketching buildings and writing random thoughts inside notebooks. Branko was completely different. 21 years old, always loud, always laughing. He worked at his uncle's motorcycle garage and somehow always smelled like cigarettes and engine oil. And somehow, despite being complete opposites, they clicked. Instantly. They first met at an underground music club in Sarajevo during the winter of 1990. A tiny basement packed with cigarette smoke, cheap drinks, and rock music so loud people practically had to scream during conversations. Milena was sitting alone near the wall, sketching people inside a notebook, and Branko walked over after arguing with someone about music. Without even asking, he sat beside her and looked at her drawing. Then he said, "You made me look uglier than I actually am." And for some reason, she laughed. That was it. That tiny moment. Nobody there could have imagined that within 2 years, their entire country would collapse into chaos. At first, their relationship felt normal, simple, young. They drank coffee together, walked through Sarajevo at night, talked about movies and music and stupid dreams about the future. Sometimes Branko joked about leaving Yugoslavia forever and buying a motorcycle repair shop near the sea. Milena used to tell him he was unrealistic. He would answer, "Being realistic is boring." And honestly, that sentence described him perfectly. But outside their little world, Yugoslavia was already beginning to crack. For decades, the country had been held together under one federal system. Different ethnic groups, different religions, different histories, all forced into one nation. And for a while, it worked. But after the death of Tito, the leader who kept the country stable, nationalism slowly started growing again. Politicians began using fear to gain power. Media channels pushed propaganda constantly. Every group was told to fear the others. By 1991, things became worse. Slovenia separated first. Then Croatia descended into war. Images of destroyed towns suddenly appeared on television every night. At first, people in Sarajevo still believed Bosnia would avoid conflict. They told themselves, "No, this won't happen here." But history has a cruel habit of ignoring optimism. Slowly, the atmosphere changed. Graffiti appeared on walls. Nationalist flags started hanging from apartment windows. Neighbors who had known each other for years stopped speaking. Even inside families, tension grew. Branko's father openly supported Serbian nationalist movements. He spent evenings watching political speeches and complaining about enemies everywhere. Milena's older brother, Amir, started attending secret meetings with Bosnian volunteers preparing for possible conflict. Suddenly, every dinner conversation became political and dangerous. One night, Milena asked Branko if he believed war was actually coming. He stayed quiet for a few seconds, then shrugged. "I think politicians want people scared, that's all." But even while saying it, he didn't sound convinced. Then came April 1992, and everything changed. The Siege of Sarajevo began. Almost overnight, the city became trapped. Serbian forces surrounded Sarajevo from the hills. Roads closed, snipers took positions, mortars started hitting buildings. People woke up one morning and realized normal life was over. Imagine that for a second. One day you're thinking about school, work, relationships. The next day, you're wondering if opening your curtains might get you shot. That was Sarajevo. At first, everyone believed the violence would end quickly. A few days maybe, a few weeks. But it didn't. The siege stretched on, month after month.
Electricity failed constantly. Water became scarce. Food lines formed outside damaged buildings. And every street suddenly carried risk, especially a road later known as Sniper Alley. People sprinted across intersections, hoping invisible shooters hidden in distant buildings wouldn't notice them. Children learned how to identify the sound of incoming shells. Parents taught kids which walls were safest during explosions. And somehow, people still tried to survive mentally. That's the strange thing about
humans. Even inside disasters, we search for routines. Milena started volunteering at a hospital because there weren't enough medical workers. Every day, she carried supplies through dark hallways filled with wounded civilians. Sometimes children, sometimes old people, sometimes soldiers barely older than teenagers. The hospital often ran out of medicine. Doctors worked for hours without electricity. After a while, Milena stopped reacting to blood. That scared her more than the war itself, because it meant she was getting used to horror. Branko's situation became complicated too. Pressure grew from his family and local Serbian groups. Men were expected to choose sides. Neutrality became suspicious. At first, Branko resisted. He kept saying, "This isn't my war." But wars don't care what people want. Eventually, he was forced into a Serbian militia unit, not because he hated Bosnians, not because he wanted violence, but because refusing made him dangerous in the eyes of everyone around him. And honestly, that happened to thousands of young men during the Yugoslav wars. History often divides people into heroes and villains. Reality is usually messier. A lot of people were simply terrified. At night, Branko secretly met Milena near abandoned buildings or damaged cafes. Sometimes shelling echoed through the city while they talked. Sometimes they only had a few minutes together before curfews or gunfire forced them apart. One night during winter, Branko looked at Milena and quietly said, "We should leave Sarajevo." She stared at him. He continued, "We can cross the border somehow. Start over somewhere else. Anywhere." But Milena shook her head immediately. Her parents were still trapped inside the city. Her brother Amir had joined Bosnian defenders. People around her were dying every day. She couldn't just leave. And deep down, both of them knew escaping wasn't simple anymore. By 1993, the situation became horrifying. People burned furniture just to stay warm during winter. Water was collected from dangerous public pumps exposed to sniper fire. The black market exploded. Bread became more valuable than money. Still, Sarajevo refused to completely die. People held underground concerts. Artists painted during shelling. Couples still fell in love. Humans are stubborn like that. Even while the world collapses, part of us keeps trying to live. Then tragedy finally reached them personally. Milena's brother Amir was killed during a mortar attack. One second he was alive. The next second he was gone. There wasn't even time for proper grieving. War rarely gives people that luxury. After Amir's death, Milena changed. She became quieter, colder, like part of her emotionally shut down just to survive. A few weeks later, Branko lost one of his closest friends near the front line. After that, he stopped joking almost completely. The boy Milena met in the music club was slowly disappearing. And maybe that's one of the cruelest parts of war. It doesn't only destroy cities, it destroys personalities. By early 1994, rumors of massacres and ethnic cleansing spread everywhere across Bosnia. Entire villages disappeared. Fear consumed everything. Then, Branko received orders connected to operations near Bosnian civilian neighborhoods. And for the first time, he openly refused. That single decision changed his life instantly. Now he was viewed as unreliable, possibly even a traitor. And in civil wars, traitors are often hated more than enemies. That night, he found Milena and told her they needed to run. Immediately. No waiting, no planning, just escape. So under snowfall and distant gunfire, the two of them moved through ruined streets, trying to disappear into the chaos around them. The city behind them burned quietly in the dark. Apartment windows shattered. Smoke drifted into the freezing sky. At one point, they hid inside an abandoned building while bullets echoed somewhere nearby. Milena looked at Branko and asked softly, "Do you think things will ever go back to normal?" And Branko stayed silent for a long moment before answering. Then he said, "I don't think the old world exists anymore." And honestly, that sentence probably describes the collapse of Yugoslavia better than any history book ever could. Because when the war finally ended, the country they once knew was gone. And so were millions of lives connected to it.